Good morning and welcome back to Radio Vision Network, Morning Coffee with Carole, Friday with Carols. And today we're very fortunate to have an author with us, but not only is he an author, he is a retiree of the federal government in many different aspects. So his career has been something other than the Civil War, but his book that he has written is totally about the Civil War. So this is Gene Schmiel, and we welcome you to Morning Coffee, Gene. How was your trip here in New Jersey? You made it safely from Virginia?
Yes, good morning, Carole. Thank you for having me. Yes, it was an interesting trip. 8-mile backup. Luckily, it was going the other way, so we got to watch it. But no, it was a good trip yesterday, and sorry we're having a little rain today, but yesterday was quite uneventful.
He was figuring that that he would go home with his convertible top down, but it's not going to happen today. So tell us why and how did you think about writing a book, especially about a book from Ohio?
Well, back in 1969, I was a graduate student at the Ohio State University, as they always tell us to say it, and in history, and I needed a doctoral dissertation topic, and so I chose a life of Jacob Dolson Cox, who was from Ohio, and his papers were at Oberlin College, which was near my home in Cleveland. So I was able to live in Cleveland, go out in the morning, look at all the papers in the archives, very dusty, and come back. And so at the end of 1969, I had my doctorate from Ohio State and a PhD dissertation of 526 pages. And at the time, I said to myself, someday I will turn this into a book which will be published. I then went from there to became an assistant professor of history at St. Francis University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. Then I was in the Foreign Service of the Department of State for 24 years. And then I retired from there 20 years ago and been doing a variety of things. And about 6 years ago, I said, okay, it's time. Time to give Jacob Cox his due with a book. And here it is.
And here it is. And we had some questions that were asked by other historians. We were fortunate enough last night to have Gene at the Civil War Roundtable up in Hamilton Library, Camp Olden, and he was our guest speaker. And some of the questions that came out of the meeting last night, one of them is, why is the Civil War in the Western theater seemingly neglected?
Well, primarily because when the war started, the Confederacy chose to make Richmond the capital, and so Washington, the federal capital, Richmond, the Confederate capital, are less than 100 miles apart. And at the time, one of the theories of military lore was if you could take the other side's capital, that would be a key to victory. So the Union was constantly in the early years trying to take Richmond. The Confederates were frequently attacking or trying to take Washington, so the fighting went all focused around there. So the focus of the governments was on their capitals, protecting them. The Western fight was focused really on one important aspect, the Mississippi River. New Orleans was the major port of the United States, and of course it was a major port for the southern crop, cotton, upon which slavery was based. So if the Union could do a blockade of the Confederacy, take control of the Mississippi, take New Orleans, that would be the long-term strangling the southern economy. So that was the focus there. And early in 1862, the Union took New Orleans. But there were several battles on the other side of the Appalachians, but everyone was looking at their capital. That's where the governments were focused.
Okay, another question that we had was, what was Ohio's most important contribution to the war in the West?
Well, probably sending its troops. Actually, I would say Jacob Cox, but Ohio sent several troops, several generals to the West. Ulysses Grant was born in Ohio. Rutherford B. Hayes was born in Ohio. James Garfield was born in Ohio. Benjamin Harrison was born in Ohio. William McKinley was born in Ohio. These were the next 5 presidents after the Civil War. All were Ohioans. All of them fought in the West. So in the long term, this was a significant contribution.
And you, in fact, have done your book on the citizen general,
Right.
Cox. And if you're saying so many presidents came from Ohio, why didn't Cox become president?
And that, of course, is one of the key reasons why I wrote the book. There was a professor at Ohio State when I was there, Eugene Roseboom, and he wrote in his history of Ohio that of all the generals that came out of Ohio, Jacob Cox is probably the most capable, the most talented. Yet most people never heard of him, but they heard of all those other fellows, all of whom Cox knew, because he didn't have much of political aptitude. He was very much of an intellectual. He was someone who didn't compromise. He was someone who was not going to tell people what they wanted to hear, which I gather politicians do now and then.
They do indeed.
He's told people, this is what I think. You don't like it? Well, that's too bad, but this is what I think. His fellow politicians told him he was crazy, but he said, well, this is the way I am.
And do you think that Cox should have been awarded the Medal of Honor?
Absolutely. One of his compatriots at the Battle of Franklin got the Medal of Honor. He was on the battlefield for 10 minutes. Cox was the one who commanded the battlefield and was the unsung hero of that battle, but he got nothing because he didn't know how to lobby Congress. But the other point about citizen general was that when the Civil War started, the United States Army had 16,000 people. By the time it ended, they had 3 million people. So they had to create an entire new army, and they didn't have enough people who were trained military men from West Point, so they had to take people from the private sector, many of whom were politicians. Cox had been in the Ohio Senate. He volunteered. He became a general immediately, but he did extremely well. Many Civil War historians look down on what they call political generals because they didn't go to West Point. Cox was very much the exception. He was as good as, if not better than, most of the West Point trained generals. But nobody knows who he is because of his inability to become a good politician. Is there such a thing as a good politician? That's a question we have to ask.
That's a question that was asked back in 1865. It's still being asked in
That's a difficult
2016. Absolutely. And the importance of Ohio, and especially in the political arena today, how is it that Ohio not only has had so many presidents come from there, but also now we even say if you win the primary in Ohio, you win the election. And what do you attribute that to?
Well, Ohio's an important swing state. Again, in the Civil War, it was considered a western state. It was way out west. They still say, and I'm from Ohio, that we live in the Midwest, but in fact, Ohio was very much an eastern state, but the West didn't go that far at the time. But they had great leaders. It's an industrial state. It's an agricultural state. It's got lots of people, so they have a lot of electoral votes. And it's a swing between East and West, and so it's able to have significant influence. Now, there haven't been many presidents from Ohio. John Kasich would have been the most recent nominee. He was a very good nominee. Didn't make it. But in the last, I think, 6 or 7 elections, whoever won Ohio won the election.
Very good. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back with Radio Vision Network, Morning Coffee, Fridays with Carole.
In Marlton, New Jersey, takes care of all your grooming needs, including haircuts, straight razor shaves, massages, facial, manicures, pedicures, and waxing. To find more information or book an appointment, visit us online at www.simplygents.com. The secret weapon of a well-groomed man, Simply Gents.
When it's time for Jersey Mike's to make a really great sub, this is what we do. It's what we've been doing. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do. So what are you doing? Jersey Mike's. Be a sub above.
Today's show has been sponsored by
Welcome back to Radio Vision Network. Morning coffee here with Friday with Carole, and I'm very pleased to continue my conversation about the Civil War, about the General Cox, the Citizen General, and with Gene Schmiel. So, Gene, tell us a little bit more about this unknown Mr. Cox, who really did not get the recognition he should have gotten.
Well, again, among the reasons was he was very self-effacing. He was one of these people like George Bush the First. His mother always told him, don't use the word I. So George Bush would say, had this happened, did this, but never the word I. He was always so self-effacing. History will take care of you with your contributions. Well, it took 150 years for me to do it. Anyway, but Jacob Cox was an intellectual. He was really one of my chapters in the book is Renaissance Man in the Gilded Age. This man learned how to be a general. He was the governor of Ohio after the Civil War. He was the Secretary of the Interior in the federal government. He was a president of the University of Cincinnati. He was a president of the Wabash Railroad. He was a congressman. He was a scientist. He wrote 30 articles about microscope photography in the early days of this. And he was an author who wrote 4 books about the Civil War, which are still today used by modern historians. They're very highly respected. So an incredibly talented fellow, but he didn't make a big fuss about himself. And I guess the great irony is, and I start the book this way, on November 29th, 1849, he was getting married to the daughter of the college president at Oberlin, and he was a divinity student. He was going to be a professor of theology and a minister. 15 years to the day almost, there he was at the Battle of Franklin, leading the Union troops, screaming and yelling to get his men to survive against the Confederate attack. And this, this irony, a divinity student general, is the fact that the Civil War, for us, September 11, 2001, was a traumatic event. For a previous generation, and perhaps with Kennedy's assassination. For these people, it was a Civil War, because it changed everything, everything about their lives. And people took directions which they never would have expected, and Jacob Cox was one of them.
He seemed very multifaceted. He had every aspect, a religious career in mind, a scientist. This book that you've written is available, and how can people get in a copy of this book?
Well, the easiest way is to go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. They're available there. The best way is to write to me, so I can send you a book and I can make a little bit more money that way. My email is geneofva, GENEOFVA, @gmail.com, and writing to me, and I can make the arrangements, and I'd even sign the book, autograph it, and so it is widely available. It is a scholarly book. It was published by Ohio University Press, but it's a scholarly book that I think reads well, mainly because my wife was my editor. And she's a very excellent editor. We had numerous arguments, and she won most of them, as wives will do. And the book was much better for her editing. So I really enjoyed writing it. And again, Jacob Cox, in one of his books, said, eventually I will get my due in history, and I'm the one who did it for
You're the one that did it. And Gene came up yesterday and stayed at the bed and breakfast, And we enjoyed taking him to dinner last night and learning more about General Cox as well as Gene Schmiel, the author. And we welcome all of you to go to his website, Gene
Of VA.
of VA. He's from Virginia, so that's where the VA comes from. Gene of VA
At gmail.com.
at gmail.com, and you can ask him to sign the book to a wonderful Father's Day gift and Christmas gift as well. So if you are into the Civil War, you know someone who's into the Civil War, this is an unknown character, a general who did everything, helped immensely in the success of the Civil War, and was not recognized for it until Gene Schmiel, 150 years after the fact, got around to this book that he's been preparing in his mind for decades and is finally in print and available to you. So we need you to just give him a holler and let him sign the book for you and get it out to you. And if you have college students, too much of the college information about the Civil War is watered down. You need it directly from the source, and Gene's research has gone all the way to the source. Of course, Ohio is his home state, and that's where he was from. That's why he chose to do this for his doctoral. So it's a good book. Again, it was received very well. We had almost 50 people in the audience last night at the program, and they too had questions for him. So if you are into Civil War, you must get this book, and it's easy enough to get. And what did you say you were charging? $25 for the book?
$25, yes.
And then, of course, postage, and we'll get it out to you ASAP, lickety-split.
And the autographs are free.
The autographs are free, so just tell us who you would like it autographed to, your child or your son, your history buff friend, whoever, and we'll get it out to you. But right now, we thank you for coming all the way up from Virginia. We're going to get him back on 295 in the road, and I hope he doesn't have too much traffic going around 495. You know, the
Yes.
Beltway is always busy no matter when you come.
Always a delight.
Yes, indeed. But and Radio Vision Network will be coming back with other shows so don't go away. Stay tuned for us here at Radio Vision Network. And this is Morning Coffee, and it's Friday with Carole. And I'm Carole Moore from Whitebriar Bed and Breakfast and the Organic Green Cafe. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on Radio Vision Network and Morning Coffee.